You know, insofar as you just mentioned a name last night yesterday during the broadcast of a CFL game, you know, I think it was Rod Black had said, like, how did the Alouettes turn around from a team that had started off so disastrously?
Yeah.
Now they're playing well. And I put there on Twitter, it's because of Jeff Garcia.
Right.
Jeff Garcia was a prominent player in the Canadian Football League. He was prominent to a certain degree in U.S. college, came to the Canadian Football League. He was the understudy for Doug Flutie. And if there was ever an example of a player, you know, who had to leave the NFL to come to the CFL to go back to the NFL, it was Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie was this time in age, in this particular era of the NFL. I believe Doug Flutie would be very successful because Doug Flutie has the mobility and that certain talent to make a play out of nothing. And you look at it right now, like Russell Wilson, what he's doing in Seattle.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable the way he's able to make plays across the grain. Like, just, you saw it last night with Colin Kaepernick. Some of these guys manufacture plays with their feet. And I think that's what Doug Flutie had. Mm-hmm. But I think it was a victim of a time when these quarterbacks had to be 6'4", 6'5". And I'm getting a little off topic here, but someone said on the radio the other day that the reason the Buffalo Bills have done lousy in the last few years is because of the curse of replacing Doug Flutie.
Well, yeah, you know what? Listen, Doug came in, he replaced, Johnson, and he, obviously he had a great year, and then the Bills made a very controversial decision when they went back to Rob Johnson for the playoff game in 1999, which ended up being the Music City Miracle. Then for a couple of years after that, it was, half the locker room had Flutie's back, the other half had Rob Johnson's back. And that's what I was talking about earlier. It's never a good thing. And the Bills made the decision to stick with Rob Johnson. Flutie went to San Diego. Buffalo hasn't been to the playoffs since that game. Since the game where they decided to start Rob Johnson over Doug Flutie in 1999, when it was Doug Flutie that played the entire year for the Bills that season, they've not had another playoff game. And now that the Royals ended their playoff drought from 1985, the Buffalo Bills can now to look at pro sports, and they're right there when it comes to longest playoff droughts, right behind the Blue Jays from '94.
I would say there's another team that's probably had a longer streak in the playoffs, or at least maybe the Stanley Cup. Bill, you know who I'm talking about.
Oh, not winning the Cup, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. Like, Buffalo may have missed the playoffs, but when they were in their prime,
yeah,
didn't win a Super Bowl, but 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances.
Mm-hmm.
Quite an accomplishment.
Well, yeah, you look at the positive, say, hey, they won the AFC 4 straight times, or the negative, they lost the Super Bowl 4 straight times. It's, glass half empty or glass half full.
Yeah, that's right. And they all played to win, so they were all disappointed. So there's nothing you can say about it other than you can't call them a group of bums that won the AFC 4 times in a row. And get back to Rob Johnson, they paid a big price to get him.
And that's the reason why, because Doug Flutie was a free agent. The other guys, they invested heavily. It was a trade, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
Yeah, so somebody within that organization was basically trying to cover their ass, right? Because why did we go out and invest so much in Rob Johnson? We got Flutie for next to nothing. His Flutie story is great, but we've got too much invested in Rob Johnson. I thought that was the politics behind that particular personnel maneuver, and sometimes politics plays more of a role in the NFL, maybe even sports, than ability.
And Rob Johnson had that, he had that prototypical size that you were talking about earlier. He was over 6 feet. He could move. He had that quarterback look, whereas Doug Flutie never did. But Doug Flutie had all the success despite being obviously vertically challenged.
And I think
flying to Boston on a Friday morning for the draft, and I sat in first class beside Doug Flutie.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea who it was because he sat there very quietly with a ball hat on. And he was the size of a peanut.
Yeah.
This guy, you mentioned it, Eric, their athleticism is off the charts.
Yep.
When Flutie was playing now, that athleticism would put him way ahead of Rob Johnson, in all due respect to Rob Johnson, because nobody could do it like Flutie could do it. And I was amazed at his size. I just thought he would have been a little bigger. And for him to play so well and be not that tiny, but if he was 5'9", he was stretched.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at a guy, he's 5'9", I would say Russell Wilson's what, about 5'10", 5'11"?
Yeah, and Drew Brees also is not very tall.
Just a victim of having a lot of ability, but going against the grain of the statuesque quarterback. Had to be 6'4", 6'5", stuck in the pocket. I mean, you see it right now. I just mentioned it before when you see these guys scrambling, taking a busted play and doing something out of nothing. And we watched it last night with Colin Kaepernick. He throws up a ball, like you're wondering what's happening. Meanwhile, the opposing team gets called for like a horse collar tackle. It should have been an interception. But some of these guys are able to manufacture plays that just keep their team alive. And yet, in the case of Flutie, it wasn't enough. And by the way, Doug Flutie, there's going to be a special, if I'm not mistaken, on him Friday night. I think it's on ESPN, the story of Doug Flutie. To toot my own horn, I wrote a book about Doug Flutie, so I got to know him fairly well. And at the time, I would say Doug Flutie, Bill, you mentioned like he's very quiet, he's got his ball cap on, didn't say very much. Doug Flutie, when he played in Toronto in 96 and 97, you could say either one of those teams may have been the best of all time. But Doug Flutie really didn't give you a lot of himself. It was basically, he loved to play football. As a matter of fact, he was like a kid. You watched him at practice, just having fun out there. When Don Matthews acquired him for the Argos in 1996, he basically told him, like, you'll have more fun playing this year than you'll have anywhere else. I'll let you call your own plays, do your own thing. He loved it there. Then he went to the NFL and he had to deal with the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback's coach, and all these guys are being paid and have their influence on what's being done. He was one of those guys who could probably, I think he would be a great offensive coordinator except for the fact that, number one, I don't think he's got a lot of time for just watching players who don't have his type of ability to see that they could do it. Number two, I don't think he really fit in that role. He tried television. I don't think it was necessarily his cup of tea.